And then I will talk about this first, crazy ABC. This is actually adapted from my watching experience, okay? Because I like to watch TV shows a lot. And then from 天才冲冲冲, there's a very famous show called Shopping ABC, right? Shopping ABC. For example, something like, abnormal. What? And then I will ask several students to come to the front, okay? Their English should be good, comparatively should be good, okay? Okay? Thank you. Okay, thank you. Abnormal, thank you. Their English should be comparatively, okay, good, okay? And abnormal, okay? And then for example, when I collect all the words, I want them to do shopping, the so-called crazy ABC, this kind of activity. I will say, okay, now I give them those list of words, and I ask those high achievers in my class to try to explain this word. But they cannot talk about that word. What does that mean? For example, abnormal, they will say, one of my students, and then somehow some of the low achievers, they can find out the words in the textbooks. I allow them to find out the words in the textbooks, okay? Of course, you can still do a spelling bee. Oh, raise your hand to memorize the words and raise your hand. But sometimes I have done a lot of activities like spelling bee. But I love this activity because it's more meaningful because it involves speaking. Okay. And then when I ask my students to express that word, and my students will say, okay, you see, I am so-so. I use the expressions which they use in their sentences, which can be a little bit wrong, okay? I am not special, but Joe is very special. So Joe is very, what word? And then some of my low achieving students will say, 哪个是特别的意思？古怪的意思？哦 abnormal. They will say abnormal. Understand? And then as long as they get the answer right, I will give them a bonus. So all the low achievers, they have the chance to get a bonus. Okay? Understand something like that? This is really interesting. My students love it. I have a lot of ways about teaching vocabulary, but some of them are not related to speaking, so I will not cover those things right here, okay? And also, this is about crazy ABC. And also, create their personal dialogues, okay? Recently, I taught 6 phrases in the textbook, like take off, it is best to, and then blah, 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 about 6 phrases. And I said, after guiding them to read them out loud, to understand the basic meanings of those expressions, I will say, oh, I'm bored. I want to do some interesting activities. I will say, now, okay, I will divide them now. 3 people will form one group. 3 people will form one group. Okay, group 1, you 3, you should use the first 3 expressions, okay? 3 phrases. Okay, you 3, you 6, you should use the previous expression. You 3 or you 4, blah, 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 blah. I divide them into different groups, and then they are supposed to use those phrases in their created conversation. Understand? Their created conversation. And then they may come up with a lot of different kinds of things you may not imagine, okay? So try to let your students use that. For example, okay, so some people will say, hi Joe, did you see John yesterday? Oh yeah, okay, I saw John going into the toilet yesterday. He took off his pants. I know it's very dirty, and later that student used according to, so on and so forth, okay, so on and so forth. I know I don't want to talk about it, but my students use those expressions. According to blah, blah, blah. Okay, something like that. And it is best for him to blah, blah, blah. Okay, so they did try to use those expressions in their conversations, okay? Good. And charade. You know charade, right? Charade actually has a lot to do with, okay, 超级比比, if you are familiar with that kind of game, right? Okay, a charade, actually, you ask the students to act out those words without saying the words out loud. You just act out those words, and you ask the students to tell you what the words mean. Okay, what the words mean. For example, For example, please guess what I'm doing, okay? What I'm doing. Okay, you may guess, oh, birds are crying, or whale, or we, something like that, okay, understand? But those words must be learned from the textbooks, okay, understand? Oh, by the way, when it comes to vocabulary teaching, remember, charades still involves a little bit, English speaking. But I have one activity which has nothing to do with speaking, and then maybe I will let you know later, okay? And then what about the next one? Tutorials or small group teaching. What do you mean by tutorials or small group teaching? Maybe you may not find that related to English speaking, but I asked my tutors from each group to teach the other low achievers how to use those words. Okay, understand? So then they have the small group teaching. However, I forced my high achieving tutors to use English, to teach them vocabulary. So even though they're high achievers, they are only high achievers in that class, they will still try their best to come up with some sentences to explain the words, okay? So it's up to you, okay, whether you want to incorporate that into your lessons or not. But I find that pretty useful. Sometimes I may find teaching them pretty tiring, so I will ask my students to teach them. But you should train them in advance, okay? Okay, now. Okay. And then next. Okay, this one, I think every one of you should be familiar with them. How do you use them for their speaking? I think everyone knows that, okay? For example, 5 W's. Everyone is familiar with that. I don't think I need to talk too much about this, okay? Sorry, my students' Toastmaster program later. Okay, for example, everyone is familiar with 5 W's. But remember, I will always ask them questions first, and then I will ask them, write them down later. So you definitely need to ask them to speak first, okay? Okay? What happened, who was there, why did it happen, when did it happen, where did it happen, okay? I ask them to read the textbooks and then help me to find out the answers based on what, who, when, where, why, how, okay? So this is not difficult, but they are supposed to speak in English, okay? And story map, you know story map. Information gap, okay, information gap, okay. Okay. By the way, I don't know whether that is suitable for the high school teaching, but you know what? When I first taught this class, I actually started with some junior high school textbooks first. So I used the so-called, information gap. You know information gap. So I don't have to talk, in details about this. You may ask your student. You may have some partial information on one worksheet, for example, worksheet A, and then you might have the other pieces of information on the other worksheet, okay, B, right? And then you may ask your students to ask each other, okay, about what do they do every day? Something like, for example, how many classes every day from Monday to Friday for Peter? And then some of the other person will help. Okay, the person in charge of Alan to answer the question. Understand? Something like that. Okay. So I think I don't have to talk in details about it. Okay. And then timeline. Okay. Reciprocal teaching. This is presented by Miss Chen Lan, right, or Professor Chen Lan. So I don't think I have to talk about them. That means, okay, when it comes to a text, you always ask your classmates, your students to serve as predictors, summarizers, clarifiers, and questioners, right? To predict what the lesson is about, and also to summarize the story, and then to clarify. That means there must be a student serving as a tutor. Understand? Something like this, okay? And then there must